For the past 2 years, we've had the quote-unquote modern Survivor era, encapsulating Survivor 41 to 45, but all Survivor seasons are not made equally, so I decided to rank all 5 of them in terms of how much I enjoyed them. My criteria of enjoyment is pretty simple: entertainment, the level of strategy, strength of the season's story, and how tolerable the twists were. Kicking off this list, we have a season that I've repeatedly bashed on, so it should be no surprises at the bottom, and that's Survivor 41. This season was the beginning of the modern era, so of course with the beginning of something new there will be flaws. However, I feel the vision was almost too grandiose, causing production to drop the ball often, resulting in an extreme lack of humour and inconsistent edits. In fact, multiple storylines just didn't seem to thread the needle for me. We had notable rivalries between Danny and Nasir, alongside Tiffany versus Sydney, plus others, but despite the prominent setup they had, they kind of fell flat. Xander didn't have much content pertaining to him booting Liana on her round, nor Heather with Nasir. Other relationship setups similarly evaporated, just as quickly like Nasir with Evie or Karud and Xander. It therefore produced this mangled mess where there was little transferability between episodes, where it felt like the dynamics were contained within one episode, only to never be touched on again. And it's quite disappointing that's the approach the editing team took, considering how pressured they were this season to fit everything into 43 minutes. Every episode had a twist, which admittedly became monotonous, and it felt like we were just on the cusp of getting a good setup, where we were dragged away in favour of explaining how someone loses their vote. Erica also receives one of the most disappointing winner edits in Survivor history in my opinion. Remember after the sham boot coming into the final 7, when literally everyone was considered a potential winner because of the insanity? Nevertheless, exit press from most contestants reaffirms her as a well-liked strategic individual who managed their threat level well, but it never fully came into the show, even the last few episodes where she starts getting a spike in her screen time. I also think retrospectively this season lacks a standout all-time great modern Survivor contestant. Shannon and Ricard are great and probably the two closest to that prestige from Survivor 41, but compared to the really fun energy of contestants on 42 and above, I can't help but feel from a character perspective their appearances in this season pales in comparison to other characters. Ultimately, I feel any want to watch Survivor 41 is mostly extinguished by another Survivor season, replicating the format, but better. However, I'll get to that shortly. Instead, next on this list, I'm skipping to Survivor 43, which was honestly a rather bizarre viewing experience. This season's editing structure felt very reminiscent to other international Survivor seasons, like Australian Survivor Champions vs Contenders 2, or the first season of the New Zealand reboot, wherein they put a lot of stock into the mid-merge and on-cast, leaving the majority of pre-merge boots plus early merge boots with rather underwhelming edits. This decision resulted in all the pre-merge boots being the oh no anyway equivalent of modern Survivor. The final 8 and on was pretty fun, with Noel's underdog arc coming to an end, Sammy threatening his shot in the dark play, plus all that involved Jesse. While Cody and Jesse's complete domination led to some steal rounds, seeing it eventually accumulate in the Cody boot was incredible, with Jesse having both Cody and Dwight's original idols. Mind you, Jesse obtains Dwight's idol because of the Knowledge is Power, which featured not just once but twice this season. To be honest, I think it's a noticeable failure of the Knowledge is Power this season that made production refuse to bring it back for future seasons, and its inability to really do anything definitely harms some of the episode's dynamics. The idols this season, while not a massive spectacle, were also probably the most fair of the modern Survivor iterations by testing social skills. It also meant the idols were more likely to stay a secret, and I felt that was why we ended up with such an explosive endgame. It really is disappointing compared to other modern seasons that the majority of gameplay and episode structure wasn't as great. However, the editing twists were fun, plus production were a bit less intrusive with the twists in the season, but alas. Survivor 41, but kinda better, is the way I would describe Survivor 42 if I was only allowed to speak one sentence. But this is my channel, so I can speak as much as I want. Due to a lot of the twists and format changes being explained in Survivor 41, 42 was able to capitalise on that, and the time that was previously used to explain twists in 41 were thankfully used to show off more of the contestants in 42. You could tell production learned from 41 and ironed out some of the format, but even made small adaptations to the mergatory or certain rewards. They were still largely the same twists, but at least there were some extraneous variables, like allowing contestants to swap with whoever went to exile, or having extra people on certain food rewards. Now, despite this positive, the season is essentially Survivor 41, just with different contestants, so it did come off as repetitive, seeing the exact same structure 6 months later. With that said, however, I feel the 42 cast had more captivating gameplay than both the previous seasons discussed. This isn't to say the gameplay was unbelievably good. The gameplay was actually very questionable, but that's actually why I like this season. We had flawed philosophies like Daniel constantly irritating Mike, Chanel dooming her entire alliance, and Tori having to pick a fight with everything that breathed. It had the biggest range of game knowledge alongside game strength. Moreover, it had a really strong showcase of age diversity, featuring one of the youngest contestants in Swathi and the oldest contestant in the modern era in Mike Turner. On the topic of Mike, I found his endgame arc really interesting, considering he didn't end up winning the game, but had a coach-esque endgame where he clung onto the honour mentality, which was superseded by Marianne having one of the best final tribal council pitches. It goes without saying, therefore, this produced some really unique dynamics. However, this is all harmed by the fact this season probably contains the lowest effort from a production standpoint, on top of it hitting the peak for the constant sob stories in the franchise. So I can't rank it too high. That being said, for a cluster of modern Survivor episodes, I do have a guilty love for this season. Number 2 on this list may come off as a shock to the fanbase, but I'm going with Survivor 44, which I think a lot of people would have had at number 1. To start off with, I don't know how the production team managed to get all 3 of Danny, Jam Jam and Carolyn, but honestly they deserve a raise due to the trio's collective insanity. That then moves into my biggest thing that makes this season, and that's the cast. It felt like everyone brought at least something to this season, with even the contestants that had weak edits like Heidi, Jamie, Lauren and Kane at least having their time to shine. This resulted in Survivor being Emmy nominated in several categories, and I genuinely believe it was because of the casting team's incredible job. But on the weighing scales of Survivor seasons, the cast is only on one side with production at the other. Now, all the production decisions weren't awful, as I do get enjoyment out of the twists like the birdcage. I can't understate that this season featured the most questionable advantages out of any modern Survivor season, which was really unfortunate considering if we had more of a bare-bones season like Diva vs Goliath twist-wise, this cast could have delivered a top 10 season. It just seemed like lots of twists or turns harmed the agency, and some ideas were produced at the last minute, trying to tilt the scales to a certain underdog or underdogs in the belief production could make a better TV product. I also feel like this was the point in the franchise where each episode was bloated, with content creating some extremely rushed storytelling. The signs were there from 41 to 43, mind you, but the inclusion of lengthy twists pushed the edited version of the season past breaking point in my opinion. Some rounds that weren't affected by newly added production twists were honestly really good, and this season contains some of my favourite tribal councils from the modern franchises. Maddie getting idled out with 1 vote in the premiere was insane. We had Danny playing his idol on Franny to eliminate Brandon, the Kane plurality vote, and Danny's elimination. Although when I really look at this compared to number 1, I can't help but feel there are certain flaws that hold it back. Instead, at number 1, call it recency bias if you will, but I have Survivor 45. In spite of this season's issues, I genuinely believe coming out of this season that it is the most superior in the modern Survivor catalogue. Yes, I have called out a lot of the twists and decisions on this season, but that shouldn't take away from the positives. Outside of the double quits, everyone really came to play, with this season having the best tribal councils out of all 5. We had Kayla blocking 11 votes, the Kelly blindside, Emily getting idled out, the Julie blindside, and the Sabaya boot. That being said, I think having normal idols that didn't risk the contestants' votes would have led to more interesting dynamics, as we would have seen Emily flip Sean, or the two go into a tiebreaker. The Beware Idols had a fun adventure theme, a lot more of the twists gave contestants choice, and we had probably the most entertaining rice dilemma, with Jeff deciding to just tear the absolute soul out of the bag. Emily has probably one of the best growth arcs in Survivor, going from this robotic, paranoid individual into a very solid, all-rounded Survivor player. Jake, in spite of his failures to flip the game, had an even better version of the Owen Knight Charlie Brown storyline in my opinion, where we could really identify with his thoughts, but understand that he lacked the connections to put them into fruition. Dee and Austin were a very interesting showmans for the show, being two people that in spite of their more than friends connection on the island, were still actively trying to undercut one another. Considering most showmances end up in duos just following each other into oblivion, it was therefore a nice switch up to the formula. Plus, with the extension in episode length from 60 to 90 minutes, it really allowed the dynamics to flow better, allowing better downtime with the contestants. At some points, I think 90 minutes harmed the show, like dragging out certain scenes filmed across a single day for an uncomfortable amount of time, but generally the time increase was worth it. Do you agree with my rankings, or have you got different seasons ranked elsewhere? Let me know in the comments down below. Subscribe if you enjoyed the content, and check out this video where we do some good old-fashioned bashing on Survivor 45. Thanks for watching, have a good day. Oh, peace!